So last night I got in like a Twitter fight about which Dungeons and Dragons campaign is the best. And I picked Dark Sun for what I think are really obvious reasons. But let's face it, that's pretty nerdy. And Chris Ziegler, if you want to talk to him about the Fast and the Furious, he will fastly, quickly, and furiously tell you which one is the best and why. And if you want to talk to Vlad about whether kale or wheatgrass has a higher and more important nutritional value for your body, bless his beating heart under his well-muscled chest. He can talk to you about that at length. So we're all nerds. We're all nerds together, and we're all nerds together about phones. And if you're watching this show right now, let's face it, chances are you are too. And you know what? That's actually kind of awesome. So let's not be ashamed. Let's be nerds together. Stay tuned for the Verge Mobile Show. Hi, I'm Dieter Baum.
I'm Vlad Savov.
And I'm Chris Ziegler.
And this is Verge Mobile Show. It is lucky episode number 13 for the week of August 20th, 2012. And we've got a lot of mobile phone news to talk about. How are you guys? How are you nerds?
I'm good. I feel really good about that introduction. You really got to the heart of me there. I actually can opine on the different categories and types of cabbage, which one is my favorite on a given day of the week.
Well, I went two different categories. Cabbage and wheatgrass really aren't directly comparable, are they? I mean, that wasn't really fair. But I'm not a huge nutritional cabbage nerd, so I guess I can't really speak to that. But I do love kale. I just we joined a co-op that delivers fresh vegetables to our apartment door, and so I've been eating a ton of kale lately, which is pretty awesome.
Good. I'm proud of you,
ridiculous. I don't know if this counts toward any nutritional street cred, but I just had a tall, cool glass of V8,
Wow.
which I'm told has 8 different vegetables in it, spanning several different color groups. They've got the red group, the orange group, and the green group. It's very scientific.
I'm pretty sure it also has your monthly allowance, your RMA of salt.
No, that's why you get the low. Stop being an amateur, Dieter. You got to get the low sodium V8.
All right. Fair
Okay,
enough.
so I'm a V8 nerd apparently.
Hey, everybody, say hi to Nate Ralph.
Where's Nate Ralph? I don't see Nate Ralph.
He's
I'm
right
not looking
behind
at the video feed.
Yeah, well, there he is. So yeah, he's at the Verge West office, which is pretty awesome. We should just get started talking about the news, and I think the main thing to talk about is just how insane September 5th is going to be, right?
Well, really,
Yes.
September in total, right? Because you have Apple presumably in the middle of the month.
Yeah.
But yeah, September 5th in particular is going to be just a complete nightmare.
Yeah, let's not disregard EFA, because I'm actually going to be there. So let's not undersell EFA, which is the thing that happens before September 5th. That's tail end of August, first few days of September. That's when we're going to see the Galaxy Note 2 from Samsung, and maybe something else. Like you kind of expect the other companies to wake up and do something as well, since Motorola is going to do a new device on the 5th, which is is going to be an Android device. So what are the other Android device makers doing? If Motorola is doing something, Samsung's doing something with the Galaxy Note 2, how do the others respond? How does HTC respond? Is LG still in this market at all?
Let's not overplay this Motorola announcement. I know that Motorola wants you to think that this is the most important event of September, but you'll notice that on the invite for that event, they have the Verizon logo, which I think almost certainly means that this is going to be the Razr HD, which is sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it's basically just an Atrix HD in a Razr body for Verizon. So, I mean, it's cool and all. I mean, that's great, but I don't think that that is going to be the most exciting thing happening next month.
I mean, I'll be personally excited because I like the Atrix, and I think that an Atrix done right Could be, well, I guess it wasn't done wrong in the first place, but that could be interesting. But I mean, someone in the chat just said that Motorola trolled Nokia by saying, "Join us for the day's main event."
Oh, big time.
I'm like, that's totally
Big time.
true. Like, that is so
That's
terrible.
exactly it.
So,
No,
so we should talk about Nokia though, Vlad.
Yeah. Just a moment. I'm being distracted by people in chat, in a whole separate chat. Yes. Well, Nokia, the Nokia event, September 5th, is going to be Windows Phone 8. It's going to be at least one device. Stop sending me chat messages, you troll. I'm talking to Chris.
I wasn't sending a chat message to you. I was sending a chat message to our producer, Brendan.
I'm sorry.
Actually, we should just point out that while this podcast is happening, we have the chat on the site, so we're watching what people are saying to us as we talk. We have our own chat where we're talking to each other and sending each other secret messages, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. We also have got our internal chat for Verge work, and actually there's anywhere between like 4 and 6 rooms that we might be in and looking at text flowing down. And I don't know about you guys, but I usually have mentioned
that while Dieter was giving that explanation, somebody peeked in through the door of my bedroom. So it's just, we're so freaking popular, we can't be left alone for a good few, 60, 90 minutes to nerd out about Kale.
Wait. Now, Vlad, I want to go back for just 1 second. The vagueness of that statement concerns me. Someone peeked in through the door of your bedroom? Like how many random people did you just have crawling around your house where some mysterious individual peeks through your bedroom?
Yes, but Chris, if I personally identify the individual and you don't know the individual, how useful is it to you or to anybody in our audience?
That's true. That's
to them is just
we've
somebody.
Already established that Vlad is into nutrition, and we've established for a long time now that Vlad is a communist. It's obvious that he lives on a collectivist farm somewhere, and so there's no way of knowing which crazy kibbutz inhabitant has opened his door to peek in.
That's true.
Seriously, Nokia, come on. Let's try and stay on track for a moment, right?
No, wait, but the point I was making is the amount of text that we have flowing by while we're trying to talk is insane, right? I mean, how many like one-line communiques do you see in the course of a day? It's completely insane. Like, and this is why we can't talk about Nokia, because we're completely distracted all the time.
Yeah,
multitasking.
And you know what? I had a really nice quote from some old-timey people. Oh God, that's terrible. The quote from Civilization, the one about bureaucracy, people appreciated that. So I recall another quote which reminds me here. A French philosopher, again, I've managed to forget the name, said that distractions are our worst enemy. And I've also managed to forget the freaking quote. I don't know why I'm quoting it. But it's like we try and find distractions from the misery of life, but then they actually take over and then they become our worst enemy. And they then themselves become essentially the misery and the drudgery of life. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you sit down and think about it, you might discover more of that truth if you go to an Amsterdam cafe and really sit down and think about it. But seriously, Nokia, let me just finish up with these guys. So they're doing a Windows Phone 8 announcement, at least one device. Could be a couple, we don't know exactly. They're doing it in conjunction with Microsoft. So as far as we know, this is going to be the first Windows Phone 8 device announcement. Both of them are making it essentially the flagship Windows Phone 8 announcement. I would expect that to be the case anyway, given their close partnership. And as Dieter was saying, Motorola is trying to troll the entire thing by calling its event on the same day the main event for September 5th. And I totally agree with Dieter. The main event for September 5th, Nokia Microsoft Windows Phone 8. That's it. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, and it's not just about Nokia, of course, right? It's about sort of the rest of the reveal for Windows Phone 8, which is a pretty big deal. And I think it's very notable. Yes. This is something that I don't think that people have discussed too much, but just the fact that Microsoft is allowing Nokia to take the lead on doing the full consumer reveal of the next version of Windows Phone is a big step for both companies and their partnership. And I don't know what that means to other OEMs, but I don't think that anyone has really known where exactly where the other Windows Phone OEMs have stood for a good year now. But yeah, this is going to be a really big deal both for Nokia and for Microsoft, and I'm excited. I know that I say that leading up to every single Windows Phone announcement, but this is a platform that I'm genuinely intrigued by and really want to see succeed and become entrenched as a viable player, because they are genuinely trying to do something different and cool and notable. So hopefully this is it. I don't, not to say that I want to see these particular Nokia phones succeed, but just this platform. I hope that this causes it to flourish in a way that it hasn't so far.
The thing that I'll be really interested in is if we get carrier announcements alongside Nokia stuff, because we've had rumors for quite a long time that Verizon might be jumping in with both feet on Windows Phone. And if you stop and think about it, Verizon going all in on Windows Phone at the same time and maybe going all in with Nokia would actually be a pretty big deal for all three of the companies involved here. And I think that would really help. The other thing that I'm really curious about is, what else haven't we seen in the full reveal of Windows Phone 8? I mean, we know about the smaller tiles. We know about, a couple like small sort of nerdy developer type features and whatnot. But I still feel like there's got to be some other big flashy consumer facing feature that hasn't been put forth yet.
I think so. I think that they're holding back. And I think that Greg Sullivan, who kind of did the PR tour around the last Windows Phone 8 event, he actually said that, right? That there's still a lot yet to be revealed. And I hope that's true. I hope we see some really cool stuff at that event on the 5th. But I hate to belabor the point about other OEMs, but where does this leave? HTC obviously is the big one. Samsung, I don't know. We're hearing rumors about this Odyssey device, and there's one other from Samsung I think we've talked about in the past that came out of the trial documents in Apple versus Samsung. But the fact that they're basically co-branding this as a Nokia Microsoft event and doing this big Windows Phone 8 reveal there is just really interesting to me. Of course, I mean, I guess Google did the same thing with ICS, right? They co-branded that as a Samsung Galaxy Nexus ICS event. So, whatever.
Well, to address the point about Samsung, I know that both Ross Miller and Nilay have been very forthright about their opinion with Samsung. And the way that they express it is, take a look at Samsung's latest and greatest Android phone and take a look at Samsung's latest and greatest Windows phone. One of them says, this is our business, this is what we rely on. The other one says, we'll just do this so there's some diversity to our portfolio. That's it. And also the thing that we've seen with these Samsung leaks, stuff that has emerged from the documents, kind of seems like they're going to do a Galaxy S3 shell, but for Windows Phone, which, again, for Windows Phone enthusiasts is exciting, right? They want that software and they want Samsung's latest hardware. But the fact of the matter is the Galaxy S3 is no longer Samsung's very latest hardware. It's a few months old. Samsung brings it to Android first and then trickles it down to Windows.
Hardware. It is still their latest hardware.
Well, no, the latest hardware is in the labs, Chris. But you know what I'm saying. It's been a few months. And the latest hardware, by the time these Windows Phone devices come out, will be the Galaxy Note 2. But what I'm saying is Windows Phone is essentially the trickle-down OS for Samsung.
Right. Yeah, I will definitely agree.
That's fair. I can agree with that. But I mean, the question about it continuing to be the trickle-down OS, I think you're right about Samsung, but will it be for HTC? HTC is not doing well right now. Is there space for Windows Phone to give them a bump, especially with so much attention being given to Nokia?
Well, I'm not convinced that would be the case, because in that case, it would be essentially change for change's sake. Because I still feel like if you look at the options that the OEMs have, Android is the best. Like, the iPhone isn't an option. iOS isn't an option for them to pick up. So that's not even a conversation. And Android is clearly ahead of Windows Phone. Unless the hidden feature that Microsoft has for Windows Phone is some underground ecosystem that has been cooking up. And all of a sudden, boom, there's like 100 really superb apps for Windows Phone, which you didn't know about before and which are now awesome. So switching over to Windows Phone would be just, well, we're different as far as HTC is concerned. But then who you're different from? You're different from the Android guys. You're different from Samsung. But you're not actually different from Nokia. And then you're falling into another trap, which is if you invest really severely and deeply into Windows Phone, you're having to fight Nokia. And Nokia's strength is design and all of the things that that distinguish an OEM. So I don't really like that fight for HTC either. I think HTC needs to just keep doing what it's been doing and hope that it can just do it better, essentially, just execute better.
Well, on a macro level, I think the question is there some economic principle that ultimately dictates that there needs to be a one-to-one relationship between platforms and successful, profitable OEMs? And that's the question that remains to be answered. But the market cannot feasibly support more than 3, maybe 4 platforms, right? There's no evidence to suggest that anything beyond that will survive over the past few years. So now the question is, can these I don't want to call them second tier, but these OEMs that aren't the leading OEM on each platform, can they carve out enough market to stay profitable? And of course, Nokia has the Windows Phone relationship locked up. Samsung has Android locked up. Where does that leave everybody else? Not just HTC, but LG, and we have these Chinese guys that are really trying to make a splash right now, like Huawei and ZTE. And I'm sure that they can be successful in the Asian market, but can they find a niche in North America? I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, even HTC has said that they're going to make a push in China, right? Didn't we see that come through? And I mean, what's we've got the story of the HTC CEO, Peter Chow. There was a memo that there's multiple areas where HTC needs improvement. I mean, Vlad, you said, they need to just keep on doing what they've been doing and just do it better. And I'm hard pressed to disagree with you, but like, if the 1 Series didn't do it for them, like what other ammo have they got sitting in their arsenal?
Stock Android.
It's never gonna happen.
Listen, it's a stock answer, but it's the truth.
No, it's not.
But it isn't.
Actually,
no, it isn't.
Last night, no. Let me. Last night, because there's another Apple versus Samsung case going on besides the main one. Which, by the way, there's a live blog of Apple's closing arguments right now happening, which you should read while you listen to this. But in the other case, which was the Galaxy Nexus ban, and that's about universal search. So it went to an appeals court, and Samsung is trying to argue that the Galaxy Nexus hasn't caused irreparable harm to the iPhone. And the quote from their lawyer was that it had a minuscule amount of sales, and like Samsung has only made, I think it was 250 million off of the Galaxy Nexus in the US. So like that was not a tiny event, the launch of the Galaxy Nexus. Google was behind it. It was it was the thing. It wasn't, a huge Apple level event, but it's on 3 carriers. It's on 4 if you want to buy it unlocked. And it hasn't taken off. So like, I don't feel like it's not about stock. It's about marketing muscle and push. And I guess we haven't really seen anybody put that behind stock. But I just have a feeling like if HTC were to do it, they'd get some goodwill from the hardcore Android fans. I would love it, but I'm a hardcore Android fan, I guess, right? But I just don't see that it's a path to like huge success for them.
I totally agree. To this day,
just one question.
There's no evidence to suggest that the average consumer walking into a U.S. retail store can differentiate between skinned Android or and stock Android, nor do they care.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with the first part. I disagree with the second part. The first part, they can't distinguish and differentiate. Fine. But do they care? Yes, they care. Stock Android versus Sense is a better user experience. And my question was, for Dieter, on your HTC One X, what software are you running at the moment, Dieter?
That's a very interesting question. I am running CyanogenMod 10, which, by the way, is not stock Android.
But it is, an effort at it. It's so much closer to it than Sense.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't even know what to tell you guys. Like, I write a piece where I say the Galaxy Nexus is still the best Android phone you can buy. Chris disagrees with me. Then both of you end up on the Galaxy Nexus, at least temporarily. Then I argue, stock Android is preferable to Sense just on the quality of user experience. Never mind if people can, recognize which is which. I'm saying they can recognize the quality of the user experience, which is better on stock. And then you guys are using it on your phone. So, I mean, the facts bear out that I'm just always right. And also, there's another fact that Tom Warren bought a Galaxy Nexus the other day. And Tom Warren is, he's got Microsoft tattoos on every body part. So
which is really painful, by the way.
But if he buys Android just because of the stock experience in Galaxy Nexus, I mean, he wanted to learn about it, but he loves it. That's the other thing. He bought it and he's fallen in love with it.
So, look, Vlad, I want to make it very clear. The only reason I'm using a Galaxy Nexus now is because I like there's still something very magical to me about tapping in a cab to pay for my fare. And the Galaxy S3, as far as I know, does not have the secure element necessary to get Google Wallet working, at least not the North American versions, with the exception
so
of
what you're telling me is you're only using this phone because it has more functionality than other phones. I get it.
No,
that's like a really shallow reason.
But Google Wallet, look, Google Wallet has nothing to do with stock, right? Can we all agree? Like they're two completely unrelated issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
They are
fine. Should we move on? I'm interested in this.
We have one more
FaceTime
thing that we need to talk about with this September 5th event, which is the elephant in the room, which is that it's a week before the rumored iPhone event, and so it's hard to get around the sense that these companies are trying to get their announcements out before the iPhone, just so that they can get a little bit of attention. Because after the 12th, the rumored new iPhone announced, they'll just be iPhone, and that's it.
Yeah. But by the way, I think that's the wrong strategy. I think that's completely the wrong strategy, because what that means is that they are giving themselves a known fixed amount of time in which they can get any attention whatsoever. And then there's the Apple event, and then boom, any attention that they had, any spotlight, any fraction of the spotlight that they had is instantly wiped off the map. If they announce after the iPhone, they control, they can dial in the product and the event and the way they announce the event, and then there's really no bound, there's no limit to how long they can control that spotlight. So I don't really understand the notion of like rushing to get something announced before an Apple event. It just doesn't really make any sense to me.
I'm not sure, Chris. I mean, first of all, it's very much in line with the habit in the industry. I mean, if you think of CES, CES kicks off, let's say, the 5th of January, thereabouts. Everybody pre-announces their announcements on like 31st of December nowadays, just to get there first, just to be able to say first, we got there first, we did this first, which is a terrible habit, but so many companies maintain it. And if you recall, Microsoft with its Surface launch event, everybody commented that although the promotional video was great and the Surface tablets were clearly well developed and designed over a long period of time, the actual event felt extremely hurried. So Microsoft was also in a rush to get there ahead of somebody else, get there in the right news cycle, whatever. And I'm not even convinced that, if you announce, let's say, a week after the iPhone, as opposed to a week before it, I'm not convinced that you can get that much hype, because everybody will be too busy saying, okay, it's 2 days until the iPhone pre-orders start shipping. Has anybody got their iPhone pre-orders? Have you had a shipping confirmation? I mean, it's all this minutiae that comes with an iPhone launch, and it annoys me, and I'm sure it annoys most people. But it happens, and that then tends to become the news coverage, which is annoying for everybody. But it's just the way it is.
I wholeheartedly disagree, but you are entitled to your opinion.
Well, how about something we can all agree on? AT&T's FaceTime policy. They are not charging extra technically, but they are requiring a different I believe, slightly more expensive plan. You're going to need to get on the mobile share plan in order to use FaceTime as opposed to their standard plans. And am I right that mobile share is replacing what's currently Data Pro, which is their tethering plan, or am I high and drunk?
I've been assured by AT&T that that the mobile share plans are supplemental to their existing plans, but you can see how over time, through moves like this FaceTime move, they are hoping to kind of like naturally obsolete the quote unquote legacy plans. So when they announced mobile share, one of the things that they were touting was the fact that unlike Verizon, where they are now putting everybody on a share everything plan, on AT&T, they are not doing that. But this is, I mean, it's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They're going to end up with moves like this, just putting all these old plans in a very bad place.
Yeah, I'm paying for the Data Pro plan right now, which is the plan that costs a bit more to include tethering, which given how easy it is to like get tethering sneakily on smartphones these days, I kind of feel like I'm just doing it out of like a Boy Scout sense of morality. But there it is. So, this won't affect me. I'm sure I'll switch over to the mobile share and that'll be that. But I imagine there's going to be a bunch of people that, are going to have to be making a hard decision of, do I want to pay more for basically the same data in order to get this feature? And so there's been a lot of noise about whether or not it breaks the FCC's Open Internet rules. And Chris, you actually wrote a really good piece on exactly what the story is here.
Yeah, I think that everybody is hoping that that this move violates the FCC's existing rules that are a part of its Open Internet initiative. And I don't have the exact verbiage in front of me, but it says something to the effect of a wireless carrier cannot block an application or service that competes with its own voice or video services. And I'm postulating that AT&T is going to argue very hard over the coming weeks and months, when this becomes a huge public policy debate, that FaceTime does not compete directly or really even indirectly with any service that it offers itself, right? Because AT&T does not offer a mobile video calling service, and you can't really make a compelling argument that FaceTime is a direct replacement for AT&T's voice service, because FaceTime can't, at least currently, can't be used in a voice-only mode, and you can't call people that are using non-Apple devices with it.
I have a piece of duct tape here that disagrees with that assertion. I'm just pointing that out.
Fair enough. Yeah, I just think that AT&T believes that they've carved open just enough of a loophole in the existing open internet regulations so that this is not going to be a problem for them. Verizon, so the next obvious question is, will Verizon do the same thing? They are in a slightly more tenuous position only because they're sitting on that 700 megahertz spectrum, the Block C spectrum, so-called Block C spectrum, that has the open access provision attached to it. And that is a much more stringent set of regulations just on that one block of spectrum that would make it almost certainly illegal for them to try to do something like this. But I think, unfortunately, I'm not happy about it. I wasn't happy about writing this report. I was just delivering the bad news that I really don't think that there is any existing law in place that prevents AT&T from legally doing this.
Well, you know what could prevent AT&T from doing this, Chris, is some actual competition, as opposed to your essentially state-sponsored duopoly over in the US, which I am going to just use as a segue, a perfectly self-serving segue, to transition into the UK and our carrier situation, which has had quite a tumultuous day today. Because Everything Everywhere, which is the company that was set up from the combination of T-Mobile and Orange, they got approval from Ofcom, local regulator, to do an LTE network on some spare spectrum that they had, 1800 megahertz. So now they have licenses to do 4G LTE on 1800 megahertz. And everybody is freaked out and pissed off about it. Vodafone, O2, Free, everybody. They're just
okay. Actually, can you explain to me why I should feel bad for these companies that aren't going to get to launch their LTE networks at the same time as Everything Everywhere? Because I don't get it. Like, I genuinely am like, what's the problem? Like, sorry guys, they happen to get lucky with the way that they manage their spectrum, and they're going to be able to launch sooner. That's. I mean, maybe it's just that like in the U.S. we've seen carriers launch networks ahead of each other, and that's just the way it is. And so I'm just used to carriers competing on, the quality of their spectrum and what kind of data speeds that can offer, as opposed to Europe, where everybody pretty much is on a more equal par there. But like, I don't see where the justification is to be unhappy about this from, of course the other companies, it makes sense for them to say, oh yeah, this is unfair, but like, what's genuinely unfair about it?
Well, I mean, your point is fair enough, Deezer, but the primary issue is the delay, right? Because I mean, first of all, there's going to be an auction to sell off the spectrum that the UK government has assigned for LTE, 4G LTE in the UK. That's going to be 800 megahertz, which is going to be the prime real estate, and I believe it's 2.6 gigahertz, which is going to be the slightly rougher one, a slightly cheaper version. The trouble is, Everything Everywhere is allowed to launch its 4G service almost now, like 2 weeks from now, 11th of September. I don't know that they'll have the service ready on that date, but that's when it can start rolling it out. Nobody else has the same sort of spectrum or bandwidth that Everything Everywhere has to make use of the same. What I actually found out was that the Ofcom decision affects all carriers. So if anybody else wants to do LTE at 800 megahertz, 1800 megahertz, they can do it. They just don't have, as I say, the bandwidth to do that.
I just don't know why is that Everything Everywhere's problem, though?
Well, the issue is that the auction isn't going to start taking bids until early next year, and people won't be able to get actual service from every carrier on an even footing, on an equal basis, until at least this time next year. So Everything Everywhere is getting essentially a year's head start.
That's all well and good, and I mean, I'm shedding a single tear for Vodafone, one of the largest conglomerates in the world. But the fact remains that under no circumstances should Ofcom or FCC or the CRTC or any other regulatory body around the world be artificially inhibiting innovation just because other companies don't think that is quote unquote fair.
Well, the thing is, market distortions, Chris. It's something that the Europeans care about and the Americans don't. There are, effects. Like, I mean, that's the other thing. In the US, you guys, and this is kind of straying into the legal side of things, you guys take a more formalistic perspective, whereas like, are the originating conditions fair, and then let people go and kill each other if that's what the market decides. Whereas here in Europe, people take a more consequentialist perspective and they say, okay, this appears fair on the surface, letting these guys have the network. And as I say, Ofcom, the European Union, they've approved this. The European Union separately is whole other thing, approving the merger between T-Mobile and Orange previously. But they've approved it, so they're fine with it. But the point is that the concern here was about what the effect would be of having one carrier in the UK with 4G for a whole year in front of everybody else. And the thing that makes this more interesting and exciting is if this next generation iPhone, which we all kind of anticipate will have LTE, if that actually runs on this network. Right, because
that's actually like that particular thing, like the piece you wrote on that, like that explains why these other carriers are like freaking out and trying to make the case that this is unfair. Like that perfectly explains it.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're the only LTE network, you got a massive advantage over everybody else. Because the other thing is nobody in the UK has done the false 4G claims that you've had in the US. So people in the UK, aren't as jaded to the idea of 4G as Americans are. So if you come out and you say, yes, Chris.
I've got news for you. Sprint had WiMAX for a long ass time before anyone had LTE here, and no one gave two you-know-whats about it.
Well, that's because it's WiMAX.
No, it's not. No.
Sorry.
I mean, it was way faster than anything else on the market when it was available.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's. I mean, you got to keep in mind that some people are still under tariff. Vlad, I mean, like people. It's not like the entire country is going to rush into everything everywhere just because they start advertising LTE.
That's absolutely correct, Chris. And I have to tell you, reading the comments from our UK readers, and also speaking to Aaron, who's my local colleague, a lot of people actually aren't all that excited. A lot of people would prefer to have more data on the 3G and more reliable data on the 3G service than to have a faster 4G service. I'm not convinced that once they get a taste of 4G, they won't be like, holy, such and such. This is like the written iPad. It's so much better. I can't live without it anymore. Because that's how you guys feel, right? Over in the US, now that you have LTE services. But at the moment, like the latent excitement, the anticipation of 4G and LTE in the UK isn't that strong. So Chris's point is valid. But here's the thing. All of these reservations and considerations that we might have about the impact of one network, because it is one network, even though it's two brands, having 4G and nobody else having it for a year, they get kind of nullified again by the iPhone's effect. Because if nobody appreciates the value of having LTE, that's Apple's strength, educating people on why LTE is going to be a good thing. So, and educating people on why they're going to want to pay a premium and why they're going to want to, cut off their contract early, get the new iPhone. And this is really the point. You're going to have two tiers of iPhones if this materializes. And PocketLint, one of the UK publications, cites sources that say, yes, the next generation iPhone will run on the LTE network that Everything Everywhere will roll out. Which, you can take that as credible as you consider PocketLint to be. And they're good guys, so yeah, hopefully they're right. It's gonna make it interesting in any case. But the point is, in people's perceptions, it's going to be very easy to distinguish. There's going to be the fast iPhone, fast in terms of broadband speeds, and the regular iPhone. And since the iPhone is being purchased, at least in some respects, because of its what was the factor I'm thinking of? Well, bragging rights, right?
Yeah.
If you want bragging rights and you purchase an iPhone, you're not going to purchase the regular one. You're going to purchase the full fat LTE one. And this is what makes it, like, I just feel like the iPhone magnifies the effects of this advantage.
Well, let's get down to brass tacks, Vlad. Who's your current carrier?
Free.
And so what's your plan when the iPhone comes out with LTE on Everything Everywhere?
Let me correct myself. My current carrier is free. Like, I have this habit of pronouncing free as free. So
sorry.
I'm just correcting myself to save the trouble for the really pedantic person in comments. I'm sticking with my carrier because I just exchange phones too quickly and too rapidly. I wouldn't switch for this.
But Vlad, I'm going to once again mightily strike down your meticulously constructed argument, because this exact same thing happened when the CDMA iPhone 4 came out, and again with the 4S, where AT&T has been advertising the fact that they have a significantly faster data experience than Verizon does, or Sprint, because it's EVDO Rev A versus whatever mysterious form of HSPA plus that AT&T is using. And of course, you have the simultaneous voice and data advantage on AT&T as well. And the numbers just don't bear out that there's been this Verizon sells iPhones, Sprint sells iPhones, AT&T sells iPhones, but the net effect of those bragging rights for carriers between, in terms of customer flow between carriers, I don't think those numbers are particularly large. And so I think you're going to find the same experience.
I got to jump in and defend Vlad here, because we haven't this experience that the UK is about to have is going to be unique, because with the exception, I think, of maybe I'm going to say the Evo 4G on Sprint, which was a new network on a genuinely good phone. We have not had a simultaneous launch of a next generation data network along with a phone that didn't suck. right? I mean,
That's right.
You can't say that the Thunderbolt on Verizon, is it all comparable with the iPhone is going to be on everything everywhere. And so, did people switch to Verizon for LTE? Yes, but it wasn't a huge, like, boom, let's do this now, because it took a while to roll out, and the first generation of phones were pretty bad. But I know, people did switch to Sprint for the UO4G, and so I think that we are going to see people buy into the argument that a 4G iPhone is better and faster than a 3G iPhone, and we're switching for.
Look, the only thing I'm thinking of right now is like the Apple adverts. Think about those. Like, first of all, everything everywhere gets free promotion from Apple advertising its next iPhone. But then there's the ads, and the ads are going to be really simple and straightforward. It's going to be, I'm downloading a full album, and then you see the progress bar. It's like zip, zip, zip with the LTE connection. It's like super fast. And then there'll be an unidentifiable phone on the side or something if Apple wants to be tongue-in-cheek. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But the point is, Apple will make it really crystal clear to people why they want LTE and why they want 4G. And there's just going to be one place to get it. That's the thing. And everything everywhere, they also revealed today that they're going to launch a new brand, which is, just completely nuts and bonkers. But it seems like this new brand they're going to launch might launch together with their 4G service. It might be the brand for the 4G service immediately or initially. And then after a while, after a few months, they might phase out Orange and T-Mobile in the UK. But for a while, there will be Orange, T-Mobile, and an unnamed brand from everything everywhere. So we can look forward to complete consumer confusion, apart from the iPhone action.
I mean, to be fair, everything everywhere is pretty much the worst name for a joint venture in the history of the corporate world.
Agreed.
So anything would be better than that.
Anything, anywhere would be better than everything, everywhere.
We can move on now.
I'm sorry. It had to be done. Speaking of things that have to be done, we have to talk about BlackBerry 10.
Do we?
If we do. We have got official screen resolutions, 1280 by 720 and 720 by 720. And
yes,
it's not in the show
displays.
notes, but we've got a good report from Josh about BlackBerry 2. Let me see if I can find that. But yeah, so Square Display, which I don't know. I miss Square Displays. I rocked a Trio for a really long time. I think Square Displays could be fun. They're the new hotness.
Let me blow your minds for a minute. Just allow me to just sit back, relax, and let me blow your mind. Imagine a 720 by 720 full touch phone. Think about it for a minute.
Just that. Kind of like
That's
the Kin.
all I have to say. Yeah, just exactly like the Kin, except without the bottom slide part. Just the top part, and perfectly square.
You know what, Chris? I'm imagining it, and all I can think is you're going to want a strap so you can put it on your wrist.
It would probably be a little bit too big, but if it was under 3 inches, I would probably consider doing exactly that. Like if it was the size of a Palm Pixie display, which I think was 2.8 inches or something like that, I would definitely put that on my wrist.
Motorola Flip Out. Hopeless Wizard just brought it up in the chat. Can't forget about the Square Flip Out.
Yes. That is what is going to save RIM, that form factor.
I mean, I'm with you, Chris. Like, if you do a really good, well-designed square form factor phone, that can definitely be a total differentiator and like something that people see and are like, yeah, that's a BlackBerry. And RIM has always had that with its BlackBerry because of the iconic keyboard design. So why not move to a new form factor nobody else uses? Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm just looking at a photo of the Motorola Flip Out, and I'm just the happiest person ever. The other funny thing is that CEO Torsten Heinz, here's a quote from Josh's piece. Sales of the devices in the U.S. took a major hit as carriers transitioned to 4G phones. According to the executive, carrier aversion to marketing 3G devices was the main culprit for the company's dipping numbers.
They're in denial. Man. They're in complete denial.
Come on.
Yes, denial. That's exactly what I was thinking.
it's indicative of a worldview that died like 3 or 4 years ago, where whatever the carrier decides to put in the front window is what sells, right?
Well, not just that. I mean, you have to admit, if you're him, you have to admit that your devices just aren't competitive anymore. Like, who does he think he's fooling? Look at your share price. Like, as a CEO, I get it. You want to be communicating to consumers, other businesses, partners, and investors, but everybody sees through this. Like, there isn't even the hint of clothes on the emperor at this stage. So just giving us this BS about, Verizon doesn't want to promote 3G phones. Yes, that's true. But that's just like a tiny, tiny aspect of why people aren't buying Blackberries anymore. Like, that's one, and there's also one market. People aren't buying Blackberries nowadays in the UK because there's better alternatives.
Earlier in the show, we were saying we hope that Windows Phone 8 becomes a viable contender in the smartphone marketplace. Apparently, BlackBerry 10 is like out for beta testing right now, beta testing. And, we've got there's a BlackBerry Jam, which is our developer event, coming up in late September. And, we're getting close to 2013, right? And that thing is going to launch. Do you guys, are you rooting for it at all? Do you care? I mean, I've been like the secret BlackBerry 10 fanboy here, which is a really weird place to be. Yeah, I know. There's some interesting ideas in the OS, but I really want to see the final OS to see if it coheres and makes sense. If it is like, oh yeah, this is a genuinely new way to interact with the phone. And I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off, but if they do, I would like to see them, claw back enough market share to survive and continue to provide competition.
I think everybody wants to see it, right? I mean, like it's the same sort of morbid curiosity that people had toward Palm leading up to the initial WebOS announcement. They're like, okay, these guys have been in the labs for a long time now. Let's see what they have cooking. But whether that translates to sales, I mean, that's a really, really big stretch for me because Microsoft still has not been able to parlay its initial success with Windows Mobile into any sort of meaningful market share for Windows Phone. The most recent numbers from the major research firms indicate that maybe they've kind of gotten past that bounce, but I don't know if it's a dead cat bounce or if it's a genuine uptick in market share. That remains to be seen. But to suggest that RIM is going to be able to show something really cool and then immediately turn that into market share, I think is just a bridge too far. It still comes down to these BlackBerry Jam events getting major, not just like individual, like really cool indie developers on board. They need to get all the big names on board, and they need to have a concentrated push. And that is one very small part of the puzzle, but it is a critical part. Without that, they're completely dead.
What's a dead cat bounce?
A dead cat bounce is an artificial bounce. It's most commonly associated with a stock price. If a stock price falls dramatically because something bad has happened to a company, so there's sometimes an artificial bounce in the stock price because investors think that there's suddenly a really good deal on that stock, but it turns out to be a false bounce and then it immediately crashes again.
Yeah, so it's like the stock hits bottom and then there's a short uptick, which is just an after effect of it hitting bottom. And I think we can all agree.
It's a fitting analogy, even if it's just freakishly morbid.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that dead cat bounce is a great code name for a square screen BlackBerry.
I totally agree. Or maybe dead cat, and then the testing of it in the labs when they're doing the ruggedness testing, they call that the dead cat bounce because they're actually throwing the dead cat.
Wow.
This conversation is getting weird really fast.
And dark. Do you guys want to talk about Apple versus Samsung? We already mentioned the Galaxy Nexus ban. As we are recording right now, the closing arguments from Apple are getting a live blog on the site. There's we mentioned this last week. There's a whole other Vergecast special edition you can listen to where they talk about the issues with the case. And I mean, what blows my mind is that this is going, like, they're letting the jury decide this. Like, the CEOs met I want to say 2 nights ago. Yeah, 2 nights ago, and they didn't come to a resolution. And so like they're letting the jury go and decide this thing. We'll see if they settle before the jury comes back. But like it's crazy, right? That
It's yeah, it is. It's what it is it's a multi-billion-dollar game of chicken. I think that
Right.
both sides are so entrenched in their beliefs at this point and feel so strongly about what's happening here that they're really letting that cloud their judgment. And I mean, Nilay, just follow Nilay on Twitter. If you do, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this show does. But if you don't, please follow him. Follow me. He's at Reckless, and he has been providing some very, very concise and important insight into what's happening in the courtroom right now. But yeah, he's as shocked as anybody that this is actually going to the jury right now.
And also, one of the amazing things to mention is that Judge Koh, who's in charge of the entire proceeding / carnival, she's making people actually stand up in the courtroom to make sure we're still alive. That's an actual quote that we got out of the courtroom. So I just honestly I envy Brian from our team for getting to attend these things in person, because it really is going to be one of those once in a lifetime surreal experiences that we're going to miss out on. Honestly, like the fact that there's no live stream for this event is breaking my heart.
A tragic. My favorite Lucy Koh moment. So each side only had 25 hours to present their case, and so they were both trying to get in as many witnesses before the 25 hours got up as possible. And so Apple says we want to get in like these 20 witnesses in the next hour or whatever it was, and Koh says unless you're smoking crack, these witnesses aren't going to get called. And the Apple attorney had to be like, first, Your Honor, I am not smoking crack. I can promise you that. Like, that's amazing. Like, huge amount of money on the line. The future of Apple's patents and Samsung's patents and the design for both of these companies on the line. And we're talking about smoking crack. It's awesome.
Yeah, I have to say, both Koh and Posner in the Motorola case have just shown a lot more personality than I ever would have expected out of, you think of these kinds of trials, or really, the court system in general, as being this very stuffy institution. And in many ways it is. But there are these moments of just complete humanity bubbling up out of these cases that you really don't expect.
Okay, I guess we should talk about Google's adding gift cards to Android
Let's not
market.
talk about what we want to talk about. Let's just freaking talk about something.
Let's talk about
I don't care. Just get into it, man.
No, wait. I do want to talk about the
There
play
you
cards.
go. So do it.
I do too.
So these I don't understand pardon my French, but I don't understand what the big whoop is about these cards. I mean, can someone please explain to me why anyone cares whether these cards exist?
I can explain, because Google thinks that they're gonna compete with iTunes, and you can't compete with iTunes unless you can buy gift cards at Walmart or 7-Eleven. They think that people are going to be putting these gift cards in Christmas cards, and instead of getting an iTunes gift card, you'll get a Google gift card, and it's going to be a real genuine content store that people want to go and buy movies and TV shows from. They think that they've got a full ecosystem that will, I can buy a TV show and watch it on my Google TV and watch it on my Nexus 7 and watch it on my Android phone. And like they've got all the pieces of having a content ecosystem, except for the content ecosystem, right? Like it's all there for Google Play. They need more content in there, but nobody thinks of it that way, right? Google players are buying Android apps, but do people really think of I'm going to buy 5 seasons worth of shows on Google Play and just have them around the way that people used to do, and maybe I guess still do on iTunes when it's not available to stream on Netflix? It's just yeah.
So obviously the queue, in theory, what the queue was trying to do would be very important to that strategy, right? But unfortunately, the queue was executed so dramatically poorly that it actually plays no role whatsoever, especially now that it's on indefinite hold. So
Well,
that leaves them
there's
without a big
execution
screen.
failures all over the place. I mean, we had Eric Schmidt saying that Google TV was going to be embedded in every smart TV by now, right? And that didn't happen. We've got Google TV boxes that are completely underwhelming. The Nexus 7 is far and away the best success story they have in terms of thinking about Google Play as a content ecosystem. But even then, I mean, as great as we all think the Nexus 7 is, it's certainly not enough to carry that on its shoulders. So Google Play to me, it's great for getting apps, but it feels like it's a checkbox more than it is a compelling content feature, just if only because they're so far behind iTunes in terms of mind share. And so it's great that they're doing this, and they'll get it on store shelves.
I'm sorry, I talked over you, but it's a checkbox for now. But then maybe, again, Google is laying the foundation to evolve and finally fashion it into like a real competitor. No, I mean, gift cards, they're not news in the sense that, yeah, wow, fascinating, something I really need to know, but they're new in the fact that they exist now. And they're just one of those formalities, like you say, checkbox stuff that you just need to have to spread your distribution and all of these things. I do have a confession to make here, actually. When Chris started talking about the Q, I heard that as Q as in QUEUE, the actual word, as opposed to the Nexus Q. And for a moment, I just completely forgot about the Nexus Q's existence. So
you and everybody
there's two
else.
observations to make about that. Now, first of all, I really like the name Q for a streaming device because you can think of it as like the place where your media queue is and where it's waiting for you. So Nexus Q, that actually makes sense to me in that kind of punny way. But second of all, like Chris was saying, that thing is it was really exciting. It was really interesting when it happened and raised a lot of eyebrows and then just kind of disappeared off the map. Which, yeah, again, like you guys are saying, like Google TV is just an unfinished something. Like it has some potential and it's unfinished. I also do kind of feel that way about Google Plus in many ways. Like you see the potential to take it and just like kick everybody's ass with it, but then Google just isn't putting the finishing touches on it. Like I don't know, the company lacks polish. Is that what it needs?
Well, what's crazy to me too is that the Q is essentially the exact same thing. I can't remember the code name, but they showed it in basically a development kit form at the Google I/O prior in 2011. And it evolved into the Q, which is basically just a spherical repackaging of that development kit that didn't really add any functionality as far as I could tell. And so they took a year to I guess part of that was the fact that they had to build this completely American supply and manufacturing chain for it. That took time, I'm sure. But in that year, they didn't really seem to add any functionality or capability to it that would get people exciting, particularly at $300. So this is kind of a very Laura wrote about this on the site, but back when the Q was originally announced. But this is kind of a disappointing first attempt at creating an American manufactured consumer electronics device by a major company, right? Because I think that there's so much talk about that right now that it would have been very, very encouraging and interesting to see a wildly successful product at a price point that made sense, that was manufactured in the U.S. But this just goes to show, I mean, it's the proof that you can't do that at a price. You're going to end up with sticker shock. There's no way to get around it.
Well, it's the thing that's crazy about the Q is like the hardware is great and the price is expensive, sure, but like Google, the software company, like failed on software, right? They failed on execution and implementation on the Q, and that's what's so disappointing about it is that it could have been more, and maybe it will be. Maybe they'll come back and say we added the functionality we talked about. But like what's a bummer about the Q is that there's no earthly reason for them to not have done more with it from the software side. I want to get back to the gift cards though, because there's one thing I totally think is important to note. gift cards on iTunes were always super important because they would allow teenagers with iPod touches to buy apps and stuff. So parents could buy gift cards, or kids could pay for gift cards with cash at a store, and then be able to use that in order to buy stuff on the virtual iTunes store. And it's actually kind of insane that hasn't happened on Android, which theoretically, since there's so many cheaper Android devices out there, you'd think a lot of teenagers who don't have full access to credit cards would want some kind of gift card solution there. So I'm not saying that it's going to stop piracy, because obviously it won't. But it could be that, it at least fills that checkbox that, if you think about it, is actually kind of crazy. That wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's a very good point that you make. It's essentially like you can now buy prepaid credit for the Google Play Store, which you couldn't do before. You needed a credit card. But actually, on the point about making software and Google software failings, again, I totally agree with you, Dieter. That reminds me of Adobe again, and how sometimes you can see a company doing something so well, like one product so well, and then just stinking up the joint with multiple other products. And, with Adobe, it's really obvious. Photoshop, Excel's, other products like Lightroom are also strong, but then you have Flash, and then you have Premiere Pro, which some people love, other people like me find just completely overbearing. And I mean, with Google, my example would be Chrome, which I still feel is the best browser, hands down, having spent quite a bit of time testing Safari 6, which I think is very strong, but Google is just better in the small and the subtle things. Chrome, that is. So I think, as much as I was just saying that Google might have a systemic problem of never finishing up things clearly and properly, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's wrong to consider these companies, just because they're so big nowadays, maybe it's wrong to consider them as one unified company, because the guys who make Chrome the browser, they're like one group and one team, and the guys who make the Nexus Q software, the guys who make the Google TV software, they're a whole other team, probably anonymous and never to be mentioned again. And I think we might be fairer to products and to pieces of software if we just analyze them on their own strengths and just kind of stop talking about the overarching companies anymore, because they're so massive nowadays. It's not like Instagram makes product number 2, or some other small company like Sparrow, before it got taken over by Google. Now it's just the Google department. If Sparrow was going to do an RSS reader, for example, then you could say it's these guys doing that. You can't really say that with Apple, Google, or Microsoft, or any of these, the massive names that we keep talking about.
But no, see, here's the thing. Like these companies are selling themselves on the strength of the ecosystem that you could buy into. And that this applies perfectly to Google Play, right? Microsoft has got its ecosystem with the Xbox, and that Windows talking to the Xbox better, and now Smart Glass is coming, and blah, blah, blah. Apple has got its Apple TV talking via airtime to the computer, and the iPads, and all those things are talking to each other now with iCloud. If these companies are going to, market themselves on the strength of their ecosystem and interoperability between the devices made by all these disparate, different divisions, then I think it's fair to judge them on that. And it's fair to say, you're a giant company, and yes, it's a small team that built this particular product, but it's your responsibility as the giant company to make sure that this team has the resources it needs to make something awesome.
Well, I
it's
long
fair to
believe
judge them on that basis, but
yeah.
Think about this. Motorola's promise for September 5th is the main event. I can prejudge them right now and say, no, you're wrong. Okay, but what I'm saying is that doesn't really help anybody understand Motorola and what September 5th is going to hold for that company. So as responsible journalists, which we sometimes try to pretend that we are, I don't think we're being constructive in taking the premise of ecosystem and then running with it the way that these companies and their press departments are doing. Because I don't really think they have these ecosystems. Like, they don't have the ecosystem within their organizations. Like, most of these companies don't. It's why HP's takeover of Palm was such a freaking disaster, because everything is insular and siloed, and it takes And, HP probably has more middle management people than it has cleaners in its offices. And this is the thing that bothers me. I mean, I can tell you this. I was speaking to somebody working at Nokia a few years back who probably won't mind me mentioning this because it was a few years back and Nokia's surely fixed everything up since then. But he told me that what you have is separate teams working on one aspect of software. So one team is working on this part of the UI, another team is working on radios and cellular signal and all of that stuff. And then in the final month or two before they decide to launch and announce a device, they all come together and they have a big integration meeting. And to me, that's the crazy thing. Like, if you don't, as a company, have that meeting to start with and then have that consistently going on, how all things fit together, then you can't sell us this ecosystem promise, whether you're Google or Apple or anybody.
No, and I think that with the exception of Apple, and okay, Microsoft especially, I think with the stuff
I
that's
think
coming to
Microsoft
Xbox
is
or
really
Windows
getting things together now, yeah.
But Google's just not there yet. Especially
wait.
Think about
You guys are arguing that Microsoft is really good at presenting a unified ecosystem strategy?
I'm saying they're really
I think
close.
Microsoft has one now, which is a change because I mean, you can really see it with the Metro style / modern design style / whatever Microsoft's going to call it. The way that they're trying to roll it out across their devices points to a strategy. I'm not saying Microsoft is great at communicating that, no.
Right. I mean, Microsoft is legendary for having these internal warring factions that all have different priorities and different things that they're trying to get done. And I think that is with the exception of Apple, like you said, Dieter, because of their, the nature of the way that organization has always operated. With the exception of Apple, most large companies suffer from that problem to some degree, particularly at a place like Google that is really comprised of dozens and dozens of acquisitions over the years, right? Android was an acquisition. And I think that some of that, culture clash continues, it perpetuates. And I continue to believe to this day, I've never been able to get anybody to confirm or even hint to me that this is in fact the case, but I strongly believe that there is a lot of distrust and dislike between Google's Android and Chrome teams over the the ongoing debate between Chrome OS versus Android and how those two platforms mesh, and the fact that they seemingly don't. There's like an entire category of devices where it is unclear which direction Google is trying to go, and I would guess that inside the company, both of those divisions are trying to argue that they are the best platform to control this particular class of devices.
But didn't that fight get settled already?
No, I don't think so. I mean, a new bunch of Chromebooks just came out, right?
Oh yeah, and everybody's thrilled, Chris. You, Louis, and Adrian on our team, and 2 other people. Yes, I can upgrade my Chromebook.
Look, I'm just saying they Google internally put a lot of work into a brand new UI for Chrome OS, so they are clearly not giving up on it. Last we heard, they're deploying Chromebooks internally as Google devices for staff. So it's not going anywhere. I just think that kind of mentality where you have all these different divisions that are kind of sent off to go in their own directions, and sometimes those directions overlap a little bit. That's where you start to run into that politicking that kind of is opposed to what it is that the company as a whole is trying to do, and that's a mentality that they constantly need to be fighting.
I have no way to wrap that up into a clever conclusion other than they need to get their act together and do it.
Yes, they do.
Well, I mean, I do want to say, I like the philosophy behind Chrome OS a little bit better than I like the philosophy behind Android. But in terms of implementation, Android kicks it up and down the street, right? And the same is applied to everything that's sort of tried to be based on the web and be a big consumer success, other than the web and web browsers, right? So I mean, we'll see.
I would argue that the Aura UI, which is I think that's what they're calling the new
I just
Chrome
got a tweet
OS.
today.
Yeah, I mean the Aura UI is excellent, but the reason why it's excellent is because they've abandoned their attempt to make the device completely browser centric. There is now a UI that exists outside of the browser. So it's kind of like it's a victory, but it's also a loss.
Well, it's a UI that exists outside the browser, but it's still like, it lives and breathes with web and web apps, right? Right. It doesn't look like a browser, but it's still a web device. And I mean, I prefer that openness to Android's philosophy, I guess. But nevertheless, the bottom line is, what plays games, what gets work done for you, and the open web isn't there yet as a platform. So,
yep.
On that note, I'm going to wrap up. Oh no, I'm not.
Just before we do, I would like to just do a little update on my Razer Max adventure here in the UK.
Oh yeah,
because I mentioned on the last show that I had turned it on as the show started, and I wanted to see how long it would last. The first time actually was really disappointing because I unplugged it from the charger in the evening on the Tuesday, and then it needed to recharge by the evening on the Wednesday, which was weird to me because it has this massive battery and it was just in standby. Whatever happened between that first charge and the second was magical, because from Wednesday night with standby, a little bit of camera use and just regular phone use, it lasted until Monday night, which for any sort of smartphone is epic. So
it's insane. But like, that's Android.
Thumbs up
though.
for that.
Android on a first boot after like a reset, it needs to like settle in. And this is a really common topic. Since I've been flashing ROMs on my One X, people are like, let the ROM settle in for a day or two before you start judging the battery life. It seems like most of these phones get better battery life after the OS has sort of gotten into a groove. And I have no idea if that actually is reflected by what's happening behind the scenes, with what the software is doing. But I've seen like that advice repeated over and over, and maybe it's just to make people go away. But I don't know. It matches my experience.
Amusing to me. Yeah. It sounds like wine drinking advice. What you want to do is you want to open it up and then just let it settle down.
Let it breathe.
Let it settle down overnight. The next night, you just keep it in a nice, cool area. If you haven't got one, just like move to the south of France. They have them in abundance, and then you let it down, and it's beautiful. No, but I was gonna say thumbs up for the battery life, which is excellent, but thumbs down for Motorola's really horrible rollout of the Android 4.0 update, because this phone that I've got still has gingerbread. And first of all, the Droid Razr Max and the Droid Razr in the United States got ice cream sandwich first, before the European version. Why that needed to happen, I don't know, but fine. Okay, so there's a late for the European version. Then the European version comes, and all you can actually find on the web about it is it's happening. It's OTA. You can get yours, and I haven't had mine. And it's been like a month since they announced they're doing the European rollout. It's not acceptable. It's really lame. Seriously.
Par for the course. I mean, that's not getting fixed, and it's not getting fixed with Jelly Bean. How long has that been announced? And maybe we'll see it on the Galaxy S3 soon. That'll be impressive if that actually happens. But I've given up even being angry about Android OS updates, because my expectations have just been beaten down into the ground, and so I just assume it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And dude, you know what else? This September 5th event, whatever comes out of it, is going to be running ice cream sandwich.
Oh, of course.
And
not the Nokia event. Not the Nokia event.
That's true. That's
yes.
a good point.
Great correction, Chris. Great correction. And I know it seems like really spoiled and weird for me to be complaining, oh, it's only running ice cream sandwich. But the point is the same point we've been drumming on with gingerbread. It's not running the latest version of the operating system. And if it's not, why the hell are you launching it? sort your phone out, sort your software out, give me the latest at the time that I can buy it. Because that's what Apple does. That's what Microsoft and Nokia are going to do on September 5th. And if all of these, Android OEMs just keep finding it acceptable to just update their phones later, and as I say, do it in an inconsistent manner that, gets it to some people, doesn't get it to other people, it's going to piss me off. And that's a bad thing, because I'm one of the people, and the people speak with their wallets. That's all I have to say.
On that inspiring note, thank you very much for watching and listening to the Verge Mobile Show. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you totally should. Together we are at Verge. I'm at Backlon. Vlad is at Vlad Savov. Chris is at ZPower. And we will be back at the internet next week. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening.